pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Welcome to episode 2 of the 6th season of our podcast, One Around. Ever wonder how death is commemorated in other countries? During my time in Bulgaria, I stumbled upon a tradition that not only fascinated me, but also sparked a profound curiosity about the connection between death and memory in this unique cultural context. The Bulgarian Necrologs are sheets of paper with printed announces of someone's death and funeral or memorial service that are placed in the streets of Bulgaria, particularly in small towns. Interestingly, these necrologs are not a one-time thing. Rather, the memory of the dead continues for an undetermined period. Today, I share with you a talk I had about necrologs with Emilia Caraboel, the writer of the article Death and Memory in the Context of the Contemporary Bulgarian Street Posted Obituary. If you want more context about necrologs, please visit our website, onearound.com. But for now, let's jump into the conversation with Emilia. And hey, we would love to hear your thoughts. Connect with us on social media or leave a comment on our website. Enjoy the episode. Well, the first thing that struck me interesting in this article is the difference that you portrayed between how in Bulgaria and other countries that still do the necrolog tradition in comparison with the Western countries that do these obituaries, and the difference between the achievements or just the connections between people and what is worth remembering from people. Can you elaborate a little bit more about these differences and how did you find this? Did you find this surprising for you?
A lot of things were surprising for me when I started to make the research about the necrologs. Really, many of them are surprising for me and for people when they read it, also because it's a very popular tradition in Bulgaria. But I found out that people don't understand why they do it, what is the meaning behind it, what are the traditions that they follow, how the necrolog appeared in Bulgaria, etc., etc. Also, I really didn't know when I started that there are different kinds of necrolog, because really for Bulgarian the necrolog is one thing, is the thing on the street.
Yeah.
But when you look at the tradition and what people do outside, you see that actually there are obituaries which we almost don't have in Bulgaria, or we didn't have when I started to make my research. And the obituary is really something very different from the Bulgarian necrolog. Also, you have those death notices in the Western Europe, which is much closer to the Bulgarian necrolog, but again, it's not the same. So when I started to compare the two traditions, I started to look also behind the structure, the form of them, to see why and what are the meaningful differences between both of them. And this was mainly maybe one of the main reasons I started to deep more into the necrologs, to find out how we develop this different way of making necrologs, not the same like in the Western Europe. So yes, there are differences mainly about the function of the death notices and necrologs. Of course, even the fact that they are on the streets already make them different, because if you post them there, you have something else in mind, something else is important for this practice. And even if this practice exists in Italy, in Poland, in some other places, still there are those death notices are more like information about someone's death, about funeral. It's like to inform the public that someone is not more among us. While here in Bulgaria, this informational part is almost non-existent or is very, very reduced, and it was reduced during time. At the beginning, it was almost the same like in the Western Europe, but it disappeared during time. And now one even in some cases cannot see even the full name of the dead person. You can see only the nickname or pet name or whatever, something, or the age or the profession or some kind of information about the dead person you almost cannot find. Of course, there are different necrologs. You can find different variations. In some you can find more, in some less. But the main accent in the necrolog is not the information about the dead person or the death itself. It's not information about the funeral, which also is mostly omitted. And also the text inside are not directed to the public that will read the necrolog. The texts are directed to the dead person. So people talk to the dead person via those necrologs. They express their feelings, their suffering, how they miss them, how they love them, and of course, mostly how they remember them. So this is one of the most important things in Bulgarian necrolog. It is also maybe one of the things that are mostly hated by Bulgarians, paradoxically, because it's too emotional, too personal, and in the same time is publicly announced. In the same time, there is this formula which is very important and also is almost everywhere in almost every street necrolog, which call for praying for this person. It's like mobilizing the community to pray for the soul of the dead person. So those two elements are the most important in the contemporary street necrolog, and especially the first one is the main difference between our death notice, because the Bulgarian street necrolog is the closer to the death notices in the Western tradition. And then the Western examples, yes, where the most important is more about who died, what is his profession, age, relatives, funeral details. Of course, in the newspapers and death notices in Western Europe, there are also, you can see these kind of elements of talking to people or expressing feelings, just they are not so often like here. And here is the main way of making necrologs. Also, I just have to mention, because it was very interesting when I made my research, that there are some very interesting examples, like in islands, Islandia, how it is pronounced. Yes, Iceland. They had this very interesting tradition, which was kind of new one, that found a very interesting articles about how this appeared there, like letters to the dead in the newspapers. Yes, and I hope that they made more research to say why it is some sudden development of the necrologs, because it's part of the same tradition. These long letters to the dead, it's really kind of direct communication with dead people, which is fascinating for me.
Yeah. Also, I noticed in the article that you arrived to different conclusions of what is the meaning of the necrolog. I wonder if you had the chance to ask people why they do it, because maybe they do some things in an unconscious level, and consciously maybe they don't have like a real explanation of why they do it.
Yes, exactly. I asked many people, young people, old people. For me, old people were very interesting, because I was thinking maybe they know more about, but they didn't. They just said, because you have to, because you're supposed to, because you're important. It's important because you cannot do it without. But why, they don't know. Young people, even more, they have no idea why they do it. It is very contradictory in Bulgaria, and it's also fascinating because Bulgarians believe they're so sure in a mass level that street necrolog is typically unique Bulgarian thing, which is far from the truth. But they believe this, and they believe that this is kind of shameful also. It makes the cities dirty. It makes them not European. It is not a good taste to expose your feelings publicly and to hang to your dead people, and why we do this. And it's a very big discussion why people do this, and how in Bulgaria it's so popular that even small children, they learn to read by reading Bulgarian necrologs.
Oh.
And it's really very interesting how there is this mass negative attitude towards necrologs, but in the same time, when someone dies, the first thing people do is to make a necrolog. So you don't like them, but actually you cannot imagine the funeral, and not only the funeral, because we post and we create those necrologs not only for the funeral, but long after this, for 40 days, 1 month, 3 months, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. People keep doing this, and you don't like them, but you do it because you feel like it's improper to not doing it. You do it automatically. You don't even think why you do it, but you could skip many other things that are related for the funeral, but you won't skip the necrolog. So it is very paradoxical, but it is. So people know they don't do it. Even it's very interesting when you see, because I ask people, for example, why for the first necrolog, which is right after the death, the proper announcement one, why we don't have photography on it. And old people especially, they say because you should not do it. It's a bad thing. It's dangerous. You're not supposed to do it. And I was thinking, what should be, because I cannot find anything anywhere, and how, in general, photography could be related to whatever tradition. If we think, considering that photography didn't exist when we developed our tradition to our deaths in general. So when you make digging, you find out that the first necrologs were without photographies, because it was very difficult to make those photography plaques to post them in the necrolog. So technically it was not possible to do for the first necrolog, and you do for the others, but it became kind of tradition. And even nowadays, when you can do it, many people don't, because they think it's a part of tradition and you are not supposed to. So you see how people invent, how people put some kind of meaning behind things that actually are not.
Yeah, I understand. Basically, like the lack of the technology shaped the tradition, and then the tradition maintained this way of doing things.
Yes, exactly. You shape some technological problem into a tradition, into a
to assign
belief.
meaning.
Yes, you put meaning behind. And we cannot forget that necrolog is a very technological phenomenon. It depends and it develops together with the technologies.
Of course. And probably the printing press was an important part in order to spread these kind of sheets of papers all around. Like you need to be able to produce them like a little bit like in a mass production. I don't know if before they were written by hand and just spread around.
Before there were some kind of things like, for example, tuli or rutuli were this kind of like piece, not of paper but papyrus or something.
Yeah.
Which were spread by the monasteries.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote their list of deaths, and they sent someone with those rutulis to the other monastery where they were written another list, and like this they traveled, and people were supposed in those monasteries to pray for these people in the lists. So they were kind of predecessors maybe of the contemporary necrologs, but the way they started to develop the contemporary way is, of course, after the printing machine and the newspapers, because the first death notices appear in the newspapers. And then when the paper becomes cheap, this is the moment. It's already the end maybe of 18th century, 19th after. It's relatively late when we can talk about mass spread, street posted, not only necrologs, but all kind of things. It is a period of time when the streets were full with all kind of fishes. These things posted on the street. When paper was cheap and when the literacy of the population, of course, became higher. So it is this kind of time, more or less.
Also, I found interesting this kind of contradiction about the meaning of the necrolog or the street necrolog in kind of making the rest of the population to pray for the deceased, but also in a way like it's to guide them, correct me if I'm wrong, to guide this person in the afterlife, but also there is like a breaking point in which you shouldn't continue doing it because then it will remain in this round forever or something like that. Am I correct?
There is no any rule about when you have to stop this. Okay. So you can do it forever. You do it until someone remembers you or until you decide that it's no point to do it anymore. So people, I don't think in everyday level do it for many years. Or not anymore maybe, because it's changing, of course. It's very dynamic process. But I have seen necrologs for really 100 years, 120 for people that keep memory of their predecessors. So, but there is no end of this. It depends completely on you. So no, there is not such kind of point of stopping doing it.
Also, you mentioned related to communism or the communism era in Bulgaria and how necrologs function as a form of mass or a way to keep alive the local traditions related to death. What do you think, or if you can have an educated guess of why communism and religion practices were like contradicting each other so much when it looks like in practice they are aiming for the same kind of reverence between the communism to the party and the religion to the god itself?
You mean for you it's almost the same thing?
It looks like it has a series of rules that look pretty similar in a way. But I don't know if that's the case or if you consider that it could be possible. Because at the end, these necrologs were some sort of, I don't know if rebellious, but something that communists wouldn't want, right? Anything related to religion.
It was more complicated than that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
First, you are right that there are many similarities of calling for remembering someone for his deeds, for his importance for the society, his labor, etc., etc. But it's more like the Communist Party. I'm not even sure how conscious it was, to be honest. But they utilize this tradition. They used it to their own means, and they used it very well. Because you can see a lot of street posted necrologs from this time, which are like propaganda posters, more or less. And also they did a lot of them for the leaders. But it keeps some kind of older tradition too, because even in 30s, before the communism came in Bulgaria, we can see some very interesting examples of famous people dying, and all kinds of institutions, groups, communities, individuals, they create those necrologs. For one of such people, I found about 150 necrologs created by different kind of organizations, like students of medicine first year, students of medicine second year, the truck drivers, the Society of Writers. It's amazing, and it's so strange to me. But all of those people created necrologs to say how important this person was, how they miss him, how the entire society will miss him, etc., etc. And this kind of thing is the same after for the communist leaders. So every institution, every organization, every city, every school has to make this necrolog to express their feeling. Of course, it's partly in this time, partly part of the funeral, all those, because it was big thing, the funeral, the big leader. But also it's a kind of declaration that we are in the right place and we do what we are supposed to. So it's, yes, this and this, but this kind of language, which is very propaganda one, you can see even in the personal necrologs in this time, and it became like part of the propaganda, because you spread certain values this way, a certain way of thinking. So you still keep memory of the dead person, respect, etc. But it is addressed like all these communist values that you express and you declare. But also, it is another stream in this process, which is, in fact, Bulgarian socialist state up until 70s, which is a long time, they were not able to really create a socialist ritual system about funeral. And they were trying to invent all kinds of things to go away from the religion, but they were not successful. And because the people didn't have a new ritual system, but in the same time they were not supposed anymore to make any religious rituals. So kind of the necrologs remained the only thing that was possible to keep. And they, for me, it is one of the main reasons it became so extremely popular, to the point of covering everything, everywhere. So people started to create those necrologs, and the only difference between the old and new ones, I mean in this ideological context, was that the crosses and religious symbols disappeared. and they were just without symbol or with this 5 communist star. But in most of the cases, it was just formal things, so not really related to the text or the meaning, etc., on the personal necrolog. But in a way, the necrolog from this point onward, it became like a substitute to the funeral, to the entire ritual itself, which for me it was very, very interesting. So somehow the new socialist system, it was one of the biggest factors for popularizing and making this phenomenon so widespread in Bulgaria.
Oh, that's very interesting, and I think it covers a little bit what you mentioned in your article at the beginning in the introduction, that death is something so unknown that you kind of need a ritual to make sense of what is happening. And it brings me to my next two questions. It would be, for you in a personal level or in an academic level, what do you think will happen after you die?
No. Personal level, for me, after I die, I will just disappear. So I don't believe in anything of this, of the soul path and journey and praying, etc. So I think I just will cease to exist. But still, even if you think about this in this way, it is nice to think that someone will still remember you, because it's the only maybe way to feel like you didn't live just for nothing, and someone will remember you for something, not only your relatives, but maybe other people. So maybe that's why people try to leave something behind them, because all those things that you leave behind, you are your
it's your legacy in a way.
Legacy in a way, and the things that make possible people to see you again and again, to read you or think of you or remember you or to stay alive in a way. Because I don't believe in this spiritual way, etc., etc. I'm not religious in any, because maybe I'm born in the socialism, so it's natural maybe to be. I'm atheistic, and I'm very, very skeptical about all those things. But still, it's good to think that people remember you. So even in this, works are important because they are signs of this remembering you. So maybe that's why it didn't matter really, people were religious or not religious. They kept keeping this.
Based on what I'm hearing, you would like to have your necrolog.
Why not? I don't mind. But if they don't do it, I also won't mind, because after all, it's not about the necrolog, it's about the memory. Of course, it would be nice maybe, and of course people here, it's even like not play, but how to say, people sometimes joke or talk about it. What do you think that people will put in your necrolog? But because our necrologs are so personal, it's not like, because I know that even in some universities, because you know that it's part of the journalistic profession in West to create these long professional obituaries. And they make this exercise, like make an obituary about yourself. But it's more interesting because you can create some imaginative part of your life, and to say people will tell about me that I achieved this, or I made this and that. But in Bulgarian necrolog, it's not possible, because what they will say, I miss you, I love you, and not too much about it. So it's so emotional. It's not something that you can play with it. So I hope people will miss me, of course, but with or without necrolog, I don't mind. both ways. Yeah.
Now, I think in a way, because in this comparison that you do between obituaries and these necrologs, I had a sense that necrologs in a way is kind of like a democratization of the obituaries, in which like you don't need to do anything remarkable to be able to be remembered. Could you consider that this is like in this way that is more less of what you have done with your life, but more the connections that you have done in your life?
Sorry, I didn't get the last thing.
Yeah, like obituaries look like they always try to point out what you have done with your life. And necrologs seems to be more focused, as you mentioned, in a very personal level and more speaking directly to the dead and talking about like the feelings or the sadness of not having them around. And I wonder if we could argue that necrologs it's a democratization of the obituary, in which just for being and just for having family and just for being loved, then you have the right to being remembered in a way that is not only inside your family but outside, and be able to publicize that it has been a loss.
I'm not sure we can talk about democratization, because democratization would mean for me that there was some kind of phenomenon that appeared and then it gradually developed in some more democratic form. Like it was first this one, but for me they were two separate things, and they were separate in parallel right from the beginning. So there are obituaries about famous people, or royal persons at the beginning, or something like this, and death notices, which are like those rutuli or those all kinds of masses that you pay for for your name to be mentioned, that in Western tradition. So it's just different thing. We have these obituaries for famous people, and we have those death notices or necrologs here for everyone. So yes, everyone deserves to have this, because it's part of the Christian way of treating dead people. You pray for them, because praying for them is the way you help them in their path after life. And even you don't believe this, you still do it, because it is the tradition that we don't know, or we don't think about it, or you do it unconsciously. So it is just for everyone, and the necrolog here is really a very democratic thing. Everyone has a necrolog. I even saw a necrolog for a homeless person, which I used to see in the center of the city. And then I saw a necrolog, so someone did it for him, because everyone deserves to have it. Also, the state, I think, at least it was like this years ago, when I did my research, when you have funeral, etc., you receive those 5 or 10, or I don't remember already how many of them were, for free, to have those necrologs for everyone, so everyone can afford them.
Now, it's interesting for me, this distinction that in the necrologs you never talk about the bad things, and it makes you believe that only good people die. And I don't know if, in your opinion, is because only good people have people to do necrologs for them, or if it's really more a way, as you mentioned in your article, to let go this any problem that this person had, or any defect, to kind of saying, well, now it kind of doesn't matter. It's time to forgive, or something like that.
Yes, I think it's deep in our culture and our tradition, and of our perceiving that like something so dramatic that it really deletes all your deeds here, because you you go to a transformation. After that, you're supposed to do it in a way that all those earth things, all your deeds, they will be judged somewhere else by someone else, and it's not your place to judge him anymore. So this formula for dead people or good or nothing is the basic formula for how you create the text for death notices, which is not about obituaries, because in obituaries you can say everything, even negative things, because you are more or less objective of this person. You just present his life. You say he was good, but he did this and this. While here it's more ritualistic. It's not about to say what he did, but more to help him go. So it's profoundly somehow in our beliefs and culture is the feeling, the belief that there is nothing you can forgive anymore, because you forgive when the person is or blame when he is alive. When he is dead already, someone else will do it. And you keep only the positive thing, because the positive thing will help him to go through this very difficult process. So it's deeply religious, but also absolutely unconscious. And consciously you perceive it like it's not right, it's not good, it's not your place, it's not acceptable to talk bad about people who are dead already, because they cannot defend, they cannot answer, they cannot argue, they cannot do anything. So why to do it? But also this attitude is again contradictory, because we keep do it like this and only good people in quotation die. But the people are not happy with this. They say, why we say so good things even for very, very bad people in the Necrologs. But it's far from this, and it beyond it. You cannot think about Necrologs this way. So yeah, I think it's just a part of the Christian tradition of forgiving and yes.
And do you think that the pardon, like forgive, heals the people that stay, like remain alive? Like it's a way, also like a cathartic way to kind of let go any anger or let go any problem, and kind of like a healing process.
Absolutely. Absolutely, not only in this case, in many other cases. I had, when I were trying to understand why people are so negative, but in the same time they always do it, I read all kinds of things, and also I found in the internet many forums in people discussed this, and I found one really heartbreaking place in which young mothers talked about their small children and that they died, and how creating necrologs about them helped them to make sense for the dead, to overcome in a way their grief, to put their grief in words, which always help, to forgive themselves, because when you lose a child, you blame yourself for what happened. So the necrolog, also in this case, you really go also, not only the dead person, but you also go to kind of catharsis, and you have to forgive him, and you have to forgive yourself, and also in a way, it's this feeling always, especially for very close people, that something was not said enough, or you missed to do something or say something, etc., etc. And again, you do that also via necrologs. You try to tell them something you couldn't do it while you were alive. So one of the functions of the necrolog is deeply psychological. Also in many other ways, like you go older and you go, and it's very sad to say, but in one moment you could see more of your close people on the necrologs than among the living people. And you gradually go closer to go to this community that is among the dead people. And you prepare yourself in a way by being among this environment full of dead people around us, which is creepy, but in fact it's not. It's like they are around us and they are with us, and you prepare for this step. So there are many levels of this psychological function of the necrolog.
Finally, I would like to talk a little bit about the future of this tradition. Precisely, you were talking about internet and about these forums. I hear that at least in Facebook, in one point in a very near future, there will be more profiles of dead people than living people, and that most of the users still interact with those profiles, still sending messages to that profile of the deceased. Do you think that this is like something that will be the next step, like the virtualization of the necrolog, or you see it as something completely different?
I believe it is, because really the necrolog is a very adaptive phenomenon, and it uses every new technology you can imagine. And even more than 20 years ago, when I did my research, and maybe a little later, I start to see this tendency in the internet. Some news sites appeared where you can post your death notices, but also really a lot of kind of death notices, because for us they are like messages. They are posted in the social media pages of the dead people, and it's more and more popular. And people really talk to them the way they talked. So it's like new technologies is new media between living and death. And I believe it will go, and it will be more and more virtual. And maybe at one point even here, because I see that this tradition in Bulgaria is maybe not disappearing, because you still see it widespread in the small cities and villages. But in Sofia, for example, already it's not so easy to see as it was before. Before it was everywhere. Now it's not like this. Mm-hmm. And I think especially young people, it will go to internet. Yeah. I really believe this, yes.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, basically I got interested about necrologs when I was in Bulgaria, in this city, probably you know it, or town in Bansko.
Yeah.
And they're still in the old town, they're still around a lot. And it's so interesting because it really, like I was taking some pictures for the article, and an old lady came and said like, yeah, well, this is my family, like, and start to talk about them, and that basically is saying, well, this is my family, and this is the necrolog that I did for them. It's interesting because it kind of show you that it kind of makes societies more cohesive. It allows to have something in common.
Yes, because all people do it, and those are your people, and especially in smaller community. Maybe it's far-fetched, or it's I don't know, but for me, because people read necrologs. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't pay attention to them, but in the end you read them. You don't read all of them, but you stop and you read, especially because they like technological phenomenon and this printing phenomenon. They have a strategy of picking your attention with fonts, with size, with
Yeah.
picture. So they call for your attention, and you stop and you read them. But every act of reading is like you become part of this community. You become part of this family. You join those efforts of praying and keep memory of this person. It's like every necrolog became, it's like a latent thing. It's waiting for you to start functioning when you start reading it. And for me, it's extremely interesting the way it functions. And all people in this way are connected and are mobilized and are, as you say, the society is more cohesive. We are together in this when we are united in the front of that, in the front of that of our beloved people.
Yeah, and maybe it give you a little bit more chances than in other countries, like in other like Western countries or United States, etc., to say, well, I have better chances to be remembered. Like this tradition, in a way, kind of maybe not guarantees, but make it more likely that I will remember for more time.
That too. This is true, but also you probably know that Philippe Ariès many years ago proclaimed, and not only him, but many researchers, it was a big tendency to talk about how we start to ignore death, to pretend that death doesn't exist. We medicalize it, we just exile it from our everyday life. We don't want to think it exists, and I find that it's not healthy first for society, for everyone. But in Bulgaria or in our countries, because it's not only Bulgaria, but here maybe the most, necrologs help you exactly not to forget, because not forgetting that you are mortal, it keeps you being more aware of how precious is your life now. So not only to be remembered, but also to be mindful what we are doing now. Because when you see a necrolog of some young person, or where many people here die not very old, you just remind yourself that life is short and you have to make the best of it. So that is part of life, and necrologs make sure that it keeps being part of life, and it's very important to be aware.
That's very interesting. It's a very present reminder that every time that you walk outside, that you know that life exists, that death exists, and it's better to appreciate life while you can. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. Let me just clarify if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It's Emilia?
Yes, Emilia.
Perfect. So I will just send you a message once the podcast is up and with the article, etc. And I will let you know about it. And thank you very much. It's very interesting, and I'm very glad to come across this article, because it really shaped a lot of information that I wanted to find, and a lot of information that I will include in my piece.
Which article, by the way? Because I was wondering.
Yeah, which article I wrote?
Did you find?
I read.
Did you find? Yes.
Yeah, it's the one that is Death and Memory in the context of the contemporary Bulgarian street posted obituary.
Yeah, it's rather old one, and it was in the early stage of my research. Yes. And,
okay, if by any chance, if it's possible to get
I'm not
an
sure I have in English. I have to check, but I don't know, because I made it in Bulgarian. I made a book, which was already a deeper and bigger research later, but not sure about English one, sadly. Yeah.
Well, if in any point, if you find a newer version, I would love to read it because it was really, really interesting, and I'm fascinated. And also with this conversation, I kind of clarified some of my doubts that I had about the article.
I'm glad. I'm glad we did it. Thank you also for this interesting conversation. It was nice also for me to think about those things again, because I don't deal with the necrolog for many years anymore, and it was a pleasure for me too.
So, what do you think about today's episode? Don't forget to share your thoughts answering the polls questions in the Spotify version of this podcast. Remember that in the description there are links to the interviewee song. You can also listen to the Spanish version of this podcast with different guests, or listen to it into different platforms. If you want to watch videos about my travels to different countries, visit my YouTube channel. You can also support me in my Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, or Anchor page. In all of them, my username is Juan Around. In Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and in all social networks, you can also find me as Juan Around. All links are in the description of this episode and in the description of this podcast. Subscribe and share. See you around.
Your booze mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer.